There are men who spend their whole lives running from who they used to be. Men who change their names, buy land nobody wants, and pray the past stays buried. Elias Boone was one of those men. He had done terrible things under a terrible flag and convinced himself that silence was the same as redemption. Then one night, a burning wagon on a valley road forced him to make a choice. And that choice, made in smoke, in darkness, in the roar of a fire he hadn't started, would either destroy him completely or finally set him free. Night had swallowed the valley whole. A black ocean of silence stretched between the canyon ridges, broken only by the hiss of wind through sage and bone-dry grass. The stars were sharp and cold, too quiet for comfort, too still for peace. Then came the scream. It tore through the dark like a soul being ripped from the earth. Elias Boone froze mid-stride, hand tightening on the reins of his mare. The cry came again, raw, human, desperate, somewhere beyond the ridge. And then the light. A bloom of orange licked the horizon, spreading fast like the world itself had caught fire. Elias kicked his mare forward without thought. The valley trail bent downward, and with every turn the smell of burning tar and wood thickened until the air tasted of ash. Sparks floated through the wind like fireflies fleeing hell. When he reached the base of the hill, the sight stopped him cold. A wagon, splintered, overturned, was engulfed in flame. The horses still hitched screamed as fire devoured their manes, thrashing against their harnesses. The wind howled with them. Elias dismounted before the thought reached his head. He tore his coat free and rushed forward into the red inferno. Heat hit him like a hammer. Smoke clawed at his throat. He heard another cry, from within the wagon, and his boots found motion again. He ripped at the flaming canvas, sparks biting into his hands. Inside, two shapes moved, women. One sprawled against a broken chest, the other reaching for her sister with arms burned raw. "Hold on," he shouted, though the fire swallowed his voice. He plunged forward, dragging the first woman out by her arms, her skin slick with blood and smoke. The second fought him, screaming words he didn't understand, eyes filled with terror and rage. He wrapped her in his coat and lifted her bodily from the blaze. The wagon groaned, wood splitting as the axle gave. He stumbled back just as the whole frame collapsed in a thunder of fire. Elias laid the women in the dirt, gasping, coughing. One was barely conscious, her face streaked with soot, hair braided with beads that glowed faintly in the firelight. The other, taller, stronger, glared at him with eyes that cut through the smoke like polished stone. Neither spoke. Their silence was heavier than the mountain wind. He touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat like a drum of warning. He didn't know who they were or what had brought them through this valley at midnight, but he knew this. Fires like these never burned alone. And from the far side of the ridge, carried by the wind, came the echo of hooves. Distant, measured, too many to be travelers. He lifted his head toward the stars, painted gold by the flames. A lone man standing against the dark, unaware that destiny had already turned its face toward him. Dawn crept slow across the valley, washing the ash in silver. The fire had eaten itself down to coals. Smoke curled into the pale sky like a soul too stubborn to leave. Elias moved stiffly, his arms burned, his shirt torn. The women lay where he dragged them, covered in his spare blankets. One breathed slow and shallow. The other sat upright, eyes never leaving him. He crouched near her, voice low and rough from smoke. "You're safe now." Her gaze didn't soften. She looked past him toward the horizon, measuring escape routes only she could see. The beads in her hair caught the weak sunlight, red, blue, and white, the kind worn by the tribes who roamed the high mesas. He noticed the patterns on their torn dresses, the woven belts, the markings on their hands. They were Apache. That single realization hit him harder than any flame. A white rancher alone in a burned valley with two Apache women was a story that could end only one way in this land. He looked toward his mare, tied near the creek. The horse stamped nervously, ears flicking toward the distance. Far off, beyond the rolling plain, dust was rising. Not wind, not storm, riders. He turned back to the women. When he offered water, the older hesitated, then took it without breaking eye contact. Her hands trembled, but her stare didn't. He tried a name. "Elias." He touched his chest. "Elias Boone." No answer. Only the crackle of cooling embers and the far-off whisper of hooves. He gathered his things, built a quick sling from his saddle straps, and lifted the unconscious woman. The other followed, cautious but unyielding. Together, they climbed the ridge toward his ranch, the only refuge within 30 miles. The sun broke fully then, turning the world gold and cruel. From the height of the trail, Elias looked back. The valley still smoked, a scar on the land, black and fresh. He felt it deep in his chest. That fire had burned more than wood. It had lit a fuse he didn't yet understand. Morning settled over the plains like a shroud. Mist hung heavy with smoke and damp cedar. Inside the weathered barn, the two women slept beneath wool blankets, their faces pale against the straw. Elias stood by the open doors, coffee steaming in his hand, watching the valley below. He hadn't slept. The images kept replaying, the wagon's collapse, the screams, the smell of burning. He rubbed his face with calloused hands, feeling the sting where the flames had kissed his skin. It wasn't the pain that bothered him. It was the echo, the memory that fire always woke. Long ago, another night had burned into him. Another fire, another set of screams. A soft cough broke his thoughts. The younger woman had stirred, eyes dark as midnight wells, unfocused at first, then sharp. She tried to sit up, wincing as pain rippled through her ribs. Elias approached slowly. "Easy. You're safe here." She blinked at him, searching his face as if weighing the truth in his voice. She said something soft, her tongue smooth, melodic, like a song half remembered. "I don't know your words," Elias whispered, "but I ain't your enemy." The older sister, Kiona, though he didn't know her name yet, stepped from the shadows near the stall, where she'd stood watching all along. Her eyes carried no fear, only suspicion. Elias nodded toward the bandages on her arm. "You're hurt." She didn't answer. Instead, she placed a hand protectively over her sister's shoulder. A warning, sharp and low. Elias raised his hands, palms open. "No harm, I swear it." The moment hung there, fragile as frost before sunrise. Then Kiona's gaze softened, just slightly, as she saw the burns on his arms, the singed edges of his coat. She understood what that meant. Outside, the mist began to lift, and with it, the first hint of dust rose again on the trail far below. The riders were still out there, silent, watching. He'd spent years hiding from his past, changing names, mending fences, burying the soldier in him beneath the soil of this ranch. But destiny had a cruel way of finding the men who owed it something. The day turned long and gray. Inside the cabin, Elias boiled water, poured it into a basin, and began washing the soot from his hands. The older woman watched from the corner, silent, strong, unafraid. He looked over at her. "I reckon you don't trust me." She said nothing. Elias sighed. "Can't say I blame you. A white man pulling you from a fire don't mean much when white men lit half the fires in this land." The words hung heavy. He hadn't meant to say them out loud. But the truth was a wound that never healed right. Years ago, when he'd worn the cavalry blue, he'd ridden under orders that burned villages like dry timber. They called it strategy. He'd called it duty, until the night his company set flame to a camp of women and children near the Salt River. The smoke from that night never left his lungs. The screams never left his sleep. He'd left the uniform behind after that. Bought land where no one knew his name and tried to forget. But you can't outlive the ghosts you helped make. You can only learn to ride beside them. He looked back at the women. Their eyes, their faces, their silence, and felt shame crawl up his throat. This was no accident. The world had brought them to his fire for a reason. Outside, the dust trail was closer now. Not one rider, not a few, but many. He counted at least 24 dark shapes moving slow along the far ridge. They weren't scouts. They were hunting. Elias backed into the barn and leaned his head against the wood. "Riders," he whispered, "coming from the south ridge." Kiona's eyes narrowed. She spoke to her sister, a word that sounded like thunder. Then she stood tall, facing him. Her voice came low, steady, accented but clear. "They find us. You mean they're looking for you?" She nodded once. "Yes." The word landed like a hammer in his chest. His mind raced back to the fire, the way the wagon burned too fast, too clean for accident. Something was wrong. Something bigger than he understood. And standing there between the women he'd saved and the ghosts of the men who died by his orders years ago, Elias Boone felt the weight of his past settle square on his shoulders. He had thought the fire last night was fate, but now he knew it was judgment. And judgment out here on the frontier always came on horseback. The sun dipped low over the canyon ridge, painting the sky in gold and scarlet. A long column of riders appeared on the horizon. 400 Apache horsemen, proud and silent, led by Chief Nantan, father of the rescued women. His eyes were like flint, steady, unreadable, yet burning with a fire deeper than anger. Miles away at the small ranch, Eli Carter sat by the barn door, the memory of the fire still burning in his mind. Inside, the sisters rested, their wounds tended, their fear slowly fading into gratitude. Taya watched Eli from the window. He did not ask who we were, she told her sister, nor what trouble might follow. He only pulled us from death. Nora nodded quietly. He does not know our father. He will come. The first sign came with a tremor in the earth. Then the rhythm of hooves, steady and growing stronger. Eli rose, hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. The horses in the corral stirred nervously. From the barn's shadow, the sisters stepped into the night. Taya's face was pale under the moonlight. They're here. My father's men. Eli's jaw tightened. Your father. He brings 400 warriors. Not for war, but he must see who you are. The horizon shimmered with torchlight. Hundreds of small fires moving like fireflies in a slow circle. Within minutes, his land was surrounded. The Apache warriors formed a perfect ring around the ranch, their torches lighting the night with a fiery halo. Eli didn't move. His heart thudded, but his hands were steady. You should go out there. Let him know you're alive. Taya stepped closer. If we go alone, he'll think you harmed us. If you walk with us, he'll know the truth. Eli took a deep breath and nodded. Then he walked beside the two sisters toward the open field, toward the ring of warriors whose eyes burned like coals in the night. Chief Nantan dismounted. His gaze met Eli's across the distance. Neither man spoke, but in that stillness, something powerful stirred. The meeting of two worlds, two codes of honor, and a question neither could yet answer. The night was a painting of silver and flame. The moon sat high, watching in silence as the circle tightened. Eli stood still, hat in hand, his face lit by 100 torches. Across from him, Chief Nantan approached, silver streaking his hair, battle scars on his chest, eyes moving from his daughters to the stranger who stood beside them. Taya stepped forward. Father, she said in Apache. He saved us. The wagon caught fire. He came through the flames when no one else would. Nantan dismounted slowly, stopping 2 strides from Eli. You risked your life, he said in low, rough English. You are not of my blood. Why? Eli's gaze didn't waver. Because they were alive, and no man leaves someone to die when he can stop it. The wind moved through the dry grass, whispering between them. The chief studied Eli's face for a long time. Then, they are safe because of you. You have done what many would not. No harm will come to you. Every Apache rider lowered his weapon. The tension broke like a taut string snapping in the dark. But deep inside that peace, shadows of doubt were already growing. Not all warriors agreed. Some saw Eli's land, his cattle, his rifle, and trust was not so easily given. Later, by the barn, Nora whispered, They do not all trust you. Eli poked the dying embers. Don't blame him. Trust is earned slow and lost fast. Taya looked toward her father's camp. Some follow another man, Taza, my cousin. He believes all white men are liars. From the distant ridge, Taza watched the ranch through wavering firelight, his hand resting on his knife. The white man's mercy is a trick, he muttered, and I will show my uncle his mistake. Dawn broke slow, its light pale and uneasy. Chief Nantan stood apart on a small rise, gaze fixed toward the ranch below. His daughters were alive, that truth he could not deny. Yet whispers coiled like snakes among his warriors. Taza moved quietly through the camp. He saved them, yes, but do you know why? White men take what they help. Land, cattle, daughters, it is their way. Each ear he bent, each nod he earned, grew the seed of doubt. Down at the ranch, Taya walked out to Eli, face pale. They talk. Taza stirs them. He says you will ask for something in return. Eli set down his bucket. Tell your father I ain't asking for a damn thing. Not land, not gold, not favor. I did what any man should. Taya looked at him a long moment. They don't all think like you, Eli Carter. By noon, Chief Nantan gathered his elders beneath a cedar tree. I gave my word, he said. The white man saved my daughters. His hands are clean. Taza stepped forward, fire in his eyes. Clean hands? He carries a gun even now. If his heart is true, Why does he guard himself? Nanton's eyes hardened. Because men like you make him need to. Then, the sound of galloping hooves shattered the stillness. Taza stopped just short of the corral, glaring at Eli. You think you can walk among us as a friend? You saved them, but not without reason. Eli rose slowly. I didn't do it for thanks, boy. I did it because it was right. Taza spat in the dirt. Your kind's right always ends with us buried. He turned his horse sharply and rode back toward the ridge, dust trailing like a lit fuse. Taya stepped outside, eyes full of fear. He will not stop. He will strike to prove his words true. Eli looked toward the horizon. Then I reckon we best be ready when he does. The sun had fallen behind the mountains, bleeding crimson into the desert sky. Eli stood at the edge of his barn, the last light glinting off his rifle barrel. The air was too still, even the cicadas had stopped. Then, from the ridge came the first sound. A hawk's shrill cry, followed by pounding hooves. 10 riders broke from the shadows, charging straight toward the ranch. Eli's voice came low but firm. Stay inside. Don't move till I say. The riders circled the corral, torches blazing. One threw a burning branch into the dry haystack. Flames roared to life. Eli fired a warning shot into the air. I ain't looking for a fight, but I'll finish one if it starts. The riders slowed, but their fury was not cooled. Taza rode forward, torch raised high. You speak of peace while your gun speaks louder. Eli lowered the rifle, eyes steady. You're the one bringing fire, boy. The first torch landed against his fence, flames crawling toward the barn. From inside, Taya screamed, Stop this! He saved us! But her voice was lost in the roar of the blaze. The fragile truce shattered, like glass under a boot heel. Smoke rose thick and black. Horses shrieked. Fire crackled. Gunfire echoed through the valley. Eli fought the flames with a bucket in one hand, rifle slung over his shoulder, shooting to drive them off, not to kill. Arrows thudded into the barn walls, one barely missing his shoulder. Then a thunderous voice tore through the night. Chief Nanton's. Enough! The chief and 50 mounted warriors swept down from the ridge like a storm. Nantan dismounted in a single motion and struck Taza's torch from his hand. You break my word, he roared. You bring shame on our blood. Taza's face twisted. Your word weakens us. You kneel to the man who took our land. Nantan raised his hand and struck Taza across the face. The sound cracked like a whip. This man took nothing, he thundered. He gave life where death had claimed it. Silence fell. Only the crackle of dying fire remained. The young warriors lowered their weapons, shame flickering in their eyes. Nantan turned to Eli. Your courage stands with the truth. Eli nodded, chest heaving, smoke in his lungs. Did what I had to do, chief. Taza was seized by 2 riders, his rebellion crushed. As the last torch faded, Taya stepped to Eli's side, tears glistening on her face. You saved us again, she whispered. Eli looked at the smoldering fence, the scorched earth. Seems trouble follows wherever kindness goes, he said quietly. Something had changed. Respect had been earned in the fire, forged in smoke, courage, and blood. The dawn broke heavy and gray. Eli hadn't slept. His hands burned raw, rifle blackened by soot. He sat on the porch, hat low, eyes fixed on the horizon. Then came the sound. Low at first, a tremor rolling across the plain, the kind that made the earth hum beneath a man's boots. Eli rose slowly. He knew that sound. He'd heard it once before. From the horizon came a sight that would silence even the boldest men. For 100 riders, their spears glinting in morning light, horses snorting clouds into the cool air. At their center rode a man larger than legend, draped in wolf pelts, feathers woven through silver hair. His face was carved with lines of sorrow and wrath. Chief Iron Wolf, the father of thunder, father of the sisters. The riders fanned out, enclosing the ranch like a living wall of judgment. Iron Wolf dismounted, his boots sinking into ash-laden soil. He walked toward Eli, each step measured. You are the one who took my daughters from the fire. Eli nodded. I pulled them out myself. Saved their lives best I could. The chief's gaze darkened. And what gave you that right? Didn't think about rights, Eli said. Just heard screams. A man does what he can to stop the dying. Iron Wolf's hand rested on the tomahawk at his side. To stop the dying, you start another war? Taya stepped forward. Father, no. He saved us. The fire wasn't his doing. Iron Wolf's eyes hardened. A father's debt is to his blood, not his enemy's mercy. The riders tightened their circle. Eli looked at the old warrior and saw no hatred, only the pain of a man who'd lost too much to trust mercy again. Then I reckon you'll have to decide which weighs more, blood or truth, Eli said. The chief's jaw set like stone. Truth has no tongue in a land built on lies. I buried sons because of men like you, Iron Wolf said quietly. You speak of saving lives, but your kind has only ever taken. Eli lowered his rifle slowly to the ground. Ain't here to argue history. I've got my own ghosts. Maybe they look a lot like yours. Taya stepped closer. Father, he has no tribe, no family. Only regret. The fire found him the same as it found us. Iron Wolf's stare broke from Eli, landing on his daughters. He studied them for a long moment, seeing the soot still on their skin, the fear in their eyes. Tell me, he said softer now, why does he live while my sons lie beneath the mountain? Eli's voice came low. Because I stopped running. Running from what? From what I did. From what we did. Eli's voice roughened. I was there the night your village burned. I rode under the flag, followed orders that didn't belong to men with hearts. Thought I was serving justice. Turned out I was just feeding the fire. A murmur rippled through the riders. The truth hung heavy, bitter, and raw. Iron Wolf's hand tightened around his tomahawk, but he didn't raise it. You speak of guilt, he said. But guilt does not bring back the dead. Eli nodded. No, it don't. But maybe it keeps the living from turning into the same kind of monsters. Iron Wolf turned his face toward the rising sun. Then he lowered his weapon, voice low, steady, and final. Then you will stand before the spirits of my blood and prove your heart is not a lie. If he is true, the land will not take him. If he is false, it will bury him. The riders murmured in assent. Eli met the chief's gaze, his body trembling from exhaustion, and nodded once. Reckon I've been waiting for a reckoning like that my whole damn life. Iron Wolf turned to his men. Prepare the trial of the prairie. At dawn, the land will decide. He lingered a moment longer. If you live, you will have my respect. If you die, you will have my understanding. Eli watched him go, the wind tugging at his coat. The coming dawn would not just test his strength, it would measure the weight of his soul. The sun rose merciless over the wide expanse of the prairie, baking the earth into a hard, cracked mirror. Eli stood at the edge of the open plain, unarmed, facing the endless horizon. Around him, 400 riders waited, spears in hand, eyes unblinking and heavy with judgment. Taya and Nora stood at the edge of the circle, hands clasped, faces pale. Taya's voice trembled as she whispered, You will endure. Your truth will be stronger than their doubt. Iron Wolf stepped forward. Your hands are clean, your heart will be weighed. Walk the land. Stand against the wind. Let the spirits of this earth judge you. Eli took his first step into the endless plain. Wind immediately assaulted him, sand stinging his eyes, the hot taste of desert filling his lungs. Every step was heavy, each footfall a drumbeat against the judgment of 400 witnesses. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, unforgiving. Sweat soaked his shirt, blistered his hands, seared his skin. But Eli pressed on. He stumbled once, twice, but refused to yield. His feet were raw, blood mixing with dust and sweat. He sank to one knee, exhausted. The wind tore his hat, sending it skittering across the cracked earth. He rose slowly, whispering a prayer he had long sworn never to speak again. Let me be worthy. A snake slid across the path, a reminder that life in this land was never gentle. Yet he pressed forward. Pain became companion. Courage became fuel. Finally, after what felt like eternity, Eli stumbled to the center of the plain. Chest heaving, skin blistered, body raw. He sank to the ground, exhausted but unbroken. Iron Wolf descended from the ridge. You endure, he said, stepping close. You endure, and the land itself whispers that your heart is honest. Taya ran to him, supporting his trembling frame. Father, he is true. The chief nodded slowly, eyes scanning his warriors. The trial is complete. Let all who doubted witness that truth can stand against fire, wind, and blood alike. The silence of the prairie stretched, filled with awe, and for the first time that day, the sun shone warm and forgiving, washing the desert in gold as if the world itself had acknowledged the triumph of spirit over fear. The prairie held its breath as twilight fell. Eli's body trembled from the trial, yet he stood. Taya and Nora approached cautiously, their faces reflecting the fading light. Eli, you cannot push further. Let them see what you've already endured. Eli shook his head. A man does not stop at the edge of pain. Not when honor demands he finish. Chief Iron Wolf stepped forward, the fading sun glinting off his silver hair. You have endured, stranger. Yet endurance alone is not mercy. Mercy lies in knowing when to yield to life, not when to yield to pride. Eli's eyes met the chief's. I reckon I understand that now. Taya placed a trembling hand on Eli's shoulder. Father, he has earned your respect. Let the blood debt end here. Iron Wolf's fierce fire gave way to the measured calm of a father who had finally seen justice. Then let it be so. The warriors murmured with relief and awe. The prairie seemed to exhale, tension dissolving into violet twilight. As darkness fell, the chief knelt briefly, a gesture of respect for the man who had stood under the weight of 1,000 judgments. Your spirit has passed the trial, he said. The debt between us is paid, not with blood, but with courage, truth, and mercy. Eli's body sagged, exhausted, but his heart felt unburdened for the first time in decades. You've earned the respect of a nation that once hunted you, Taya said softly, and perhaps even of the land itself. Eli looked up at the sky, deep and endless, stars burning like witness fires. For the first time in years, he could breathe freely, knowing that the fires of the past had not consumed him. Mercy, once given and earned, was a gift stronger than any weapon. The first light of dawn crept softly across the plains, spilling gold over the jagged horizon. Smoke from the old fires had long since vanished, leaving only the faint scent of charred earth. Eli Carter stood on his porch, watching the prairie wake in slow, gentle breaths. The land bore scars, scorched fences, trampled grasses, but there was a calm beneath it all, as if the earth itself had forgiven what had passed. Taya and Nora emerged from the barn, carrying fresh water and bread. Eli met their eyes and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. You are well, Taya asked softly. Eli smiled faintly. As well as a man can be who's danced with fire and lived to tell it. Chief Iron Wolf rode slowly toward the ranch, flanked by a small group of warriors. This time, there was no threat in their eyes, only solemn respect. The land speaks of peace, the chief said, and the wind carries word that you have walked honestly through its trial. Eli lowered his hat. I reckon the land is wiser than the rest of us. The following weeks passed slowly, measured in rebuilding and quiet reflection. Eli repaired the fences, planted new crops, tended the animals. The barn, now stronger than ever, became a symbol of resilience. Taya and Nora visited often, bringing laughter and stories of the tribe's daily life. Chief Iron Wolf himself would occasionally ride by, nodding in respect, the distance between their worlds slowly narrowing. One morning, Taya placed a basket of wildflowers at Eli's feet. For you, a reminder that life endures. Eli knelt, touching the blossoms lightly. I'll remember, he said softly. Not just the danger, but the mercy, the courage, the truth. As the chief's riders returned to the ridge one final time, Eli watched them, knowing that the circle of mistrust had been broken. The prairie stretched endlessly before him, sun-gilded and serene, a living testament to endurance, honor, and the fragile, powerful beauty of forgiveness. The man who had once been haunted by ghosts of war and fire now stood in the calm of a prairie reborn, carrying the quiet truth that courage, mercy, and honesty could endure, even in the harshest of lands. On land ruled by dust and blood, the only thing stronger than fear is the courage to do what's right when no one is watching.